Sickle cell is a disease that is quite widespread around the world according to history sources, which further show that it was first discovered after a test by Dr. Ernest Edward on a patient by the name Walter Clement in 1910, a first-year student in Chicago. The recent studies here in Kenya indicate that 80% of patients suffering from the disease come from western part of the country, followed by the coastal region, with Mathare, Kibera and Kariobangi the mainly affected areas in Nairobi. 77% of these cases were reportedly to be below 15 years old. Many children are said to die undiagnosed, and more than 90% succumb before the age of 5. Violet Mbatu, a banker and also a mother of two, first knew she had sickle cell disease at the tender age of 12 during a blood transfusion procedure. The journey, she says, has not been easy.
Imagine having a paper cut on your finger and it's continuous. The pain on the paper cut is continuous. It's continuous. Then magnify that pain by a number like maybe 10 or 20. Then now put it on a certain specific part of your body. That is just an explanation on what the experience is when you're having a sickle cell crisis. You feel pain, some extreme pain.
Batu believes that she is lucky and blessed to have survived the disease to adulthood. She says the tests, management and even the long-term bone marrow transplant solution is quite expensive. Her mom, being a nurse, was more than a blessing, and she was able to get emergency attention during pain episodes associated with the disease. This is unlike her two friends who succumbed to the disease.
So that day we got sick together. We were both rushed to Nairobi Hospital. I went through the emergency, and she went through casualty. I got out, she didn't get out. That sort of experience that doesn't sit well. Why?
Sickle cell. Sickle cell is characterized by a group of disorders that affects the hemoglobin, a molecule in the red blood cells that transports oxygen in the whole body. People with this disorder have hemoglobin S, which can distort red blood cells into forming a sickle or crescent shape.
So sickle cell disease is a genetic disease, and this is over an evolution this has come on into populations. That's why you see certain areas have got a higher incidence, certain areas have got a lower incidence. And predominantly sickle cell disease is an African disease.
The sickle cell trait can be passed down to a child who has a 50% chance of acquiring the trait and a 25% chance of having the disease if both parents are carriers. But why is the disease predominant among the African population? Malaria.
Due to adaptations, it has happened, as we were discussing earlier. In the olden days, people had, certain areas had a high incidence of malaria, and people used to die of malaria. So the malaria parasite used to stay inside the red cell. So what the environment has done is change the red cell shape to a sickled cell shape, so that this malaria parasite cannot survive. That is how people survived from malaria, but by default, they developed a mutation to get this sickle cell disease.
According to Anthony Clifford Allison, a medical scientist who conducted numerous tests in 1954 within East Africa with over 5,000 samples, people with sickle cell trait are resistant to malaria.
Well, the scientific method essentially means that you address a problem and try to find a solution. And so you look at children of the appropriate age and find out whether they are in fact protected against malaria. And if that's the case, you predict that you will have high frequencies of sickle cells only in areas where malaria is endemic.
With the disease contributing to high mortality rates in the country, Dr. Lokiredi notes that bone marrow transplant for now remains a long-term solution and should be conducted at an early age. However,
post-transplant, if they've had a child, they are cured of disease, but they were still carrying that gene, so it will still be transmitted.
For most Kenyan sicklers, however, it is a cost that may be difficult for them to bear, with over 5 million shillings required for the procedure, and therefore all that is left is learning how to manage it, with persons hoping to get married and already have the disease advised to seek medical guidance to reduce the chances of passing the disease down to the next generations. For Switch TV, I'm Jockey Marita.